Hi everyone, it's Abby. So this is going to be my first YouTube video. It's basically just an extension of my booktube because I find it easier to like physically talk about books than like write reviews for them, and I thought it'd be more fun this way because I can like rank things and I don't have to find like a nice aesthetic photo. I just thought it'd be fun, and my light keeps flickering, so if the lighting keeps changing, that is why. There's your answer. It's really annoying. But basically today what I'm going to be doing is ranking every single book that I've read this year from worst to best. The first book I'm going to talk about is going to be the worst, and that's going to go all the way down to the best book that I've read this year. There is 44 books that I've read this year. It's not about that, I'm just saying this video may be a little bit long. I'm going to try and like not ramble on about them. I have my list on my phone here. So, the worst book that I've read this year, which is number 44, is Comfort Food by Kitty Thomas. This is a dark romance thriller, if you could kind of call it that. It's about a girl who gets abducted and her captor doesn't speak to her, and it's about the ways that he tries to control her with his mind and with his actions, and kind of the results, which is Stockholm Syndrome. This book was trash. This book was awful. I hated every second of it. There was like no dialogue throughout the whole thing, which obviously was intentional, but it just annoyed me. Yeah, like Stockholm Syndrome, I'm not going to be able to like understand her thought process, but like this is like an all-time favourite for like dark romance captor stories. But I hated it, so that's why it's last. Actually, to be fair, most of my dark romances are pretty low down on this list, but that's just because like I can't really rate them that highly because they're too dark. Anyway, so going into number 43, we have This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay, which I know as well has like a huge fan base. It's been turned into a TV show. Everyone loves this book. I just found it quite, and don't get me wrong, huge respect obviously for anyone who works in the NHS. It must be the most difficult job in the world. It wasn't kind of about that. It was just like his writing style and the way he put things, and I didn't like how it was a lot of short little snippets. I just didn't enjoy it. I thought that he was quite rude in like what he was saying, a bit sexist. I don't know. I just didn't enjoy it. I'm sorry. Number 42 is Vox by Christina Dalcher or Dalker. I know a lot of people love this book as well. It's kind of like a feminist dystopian. I loved the first half. If the whole book was like the first half, I would have loved it. I just thought it was about 100 pages too long. The ending went all sci-fi and crazy. If you've read it, like I think you'll understand what I mean. It just wasn't my cup of tea. It's not where I expected it to go, and therefore it's low down on this list. 41, we have Medusa by Jessie Burton. This is it a young adult or like a children's book? I think it's a young adult book. Like a retelling of Medusa from like a feminist perspective, which I am all for. I love the Medusa story. This book was just aimed at a younger audience than me, and I appreciated it for what it is. It's beautiful. I have it displayed in my room at home, but it just wasn't for me. It wasn't meant for me, really. But I appreciated it. I didn't dislike this book in any means. Then we have at number 40, Greek Myths, a New Retelling by Charlotte Higgins. This was kind of just a repeat of Greek mythology. Not really. It was supposed to be from like a female perspective or a feminist perspective, but I found that the stories were kind of just tellings rather than like retellings and like making it into like an imaginative story. It was okay. I like Greek mythology, therefore I enjoyed it. That's why I picked it up. It was quite expensive as well for like what it was, and the illustrations were pretty and everything, but it wasn't groundbreaking. It wasn't anything that I hadn't read before, and I also found it quite complex for someone who has studied Greek mythology. I found it a little bit inaccessible as well. So yeah. The next one is Haunted by Chuck Palahniuk. I don't know, it's the guy who wrote Fight Club. I feel like that's what everyone knows him for anyway. This is like an extreme horror. It's kind of like a collection of short stories that have this overarching storyline. and at the start of each story there is a poem and like another short story within the story. 30% of the story is really interesting and I loved them. Like if it would just have been them short stories, I'm sure this book would have been 5th spot or something. But this book was like 600 pages. It was too long. I didn't enjoy all the short stories. I thought some of them were boring, some of them were great, and this book as well, like just the bits that I loved, like I absolutely loved, like the quotes in this book were amazing. You know, I've like highlighted through the whole thing. I think it's gorgeously written. It's most of them were trash. If you want to read it and you're just interested in the short stories, then just read the short stories. This overarching storyline is so repetitive and boring. Fragments of Horror by Junji Ito, and I'm so upset that a Junji Ito book is so far down on this list. I love Junji Ito, like you'll see most of his works I've read right at the top end. This one was so disappointing. Apparently it was like his comeback. He'd not written for a while, which is like understandable. It would be lower down if it wasn't Junji Ito and the illustrations weren't as gorgeous as they are, but the stories were just not great, so it has to be pretty low down. Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung. This is also a collection of short stories. This one was like interesting. Again, some of the stories were okay. Some of the stories could have missed out huge chunks of them. They like led you in one direction and then none of that information mattered at the end of the story, so I was like, what was the point? But yeah, some of them were good. I appreciated it, but it just wasn't the most exciting book that I've read. I then have the Twist Me series by Anna Zayas. This is another dark romance, this is 3 books. I've just kind of clunked them all together because I feel like it's just an overarching story, really. The first book though was definitely the best out of the 3 of them. If like the second book was in there, it would have been like the worst. I hated the second one, but as like a whole, if you read them like back to back and it was like a continuous story, then it would be in this place. Another captor romance, again, trigger warnings. Yeah, once again, it was okay. I like dark romances. If you're looking for like a dark romance, you're an avid dark romance reader, I would recommend this one for you. Because the characters were definitely more fleshed out. I actually ended up quite liking Julian, which was disturbing. We have One of the Girls by Lucy Clark. This was a thriller about some friends who go on a hen do. I can't remember where they are, but they're on like a beautiful island and things start to happen. There's secrets, there's death. It was just like a basic thriller, really. Like I didn't like love the twist. I thought it was good, but it didn't blow me away. So like all the like mediocre thrillers are like chunked up in this point, because next we have The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley, which is just a little bit higher than One of the Girls because I loved the Parisian atmosphere. Like I thought that like I could definitely pitch myself there. It was very like transcendent. The characters were interesting enough, and yeah, as I said, the setting was gorgeous. The twist at the end wasn't my favourite. Mediocre, but you know, I would still probably recommend this to someone who's maybe just like starting to get into thrillers and doesn't mind kind of a slow build up. It was more of like a domestic thriller for most of it. And next is Every Last Secret by A.R. Tor, which is also a domestic thriller. It's about this woman who's jealous of this other rich woman and wants to like steal her life, and they're both just kind of back and forth, petty, rich drama basically. Which, but overall, again, just a good domestic thriller. We then have A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee. This is kind of like a witchy, dark academia, like young adult dark academia. I thought this one was good. I like the setting. Again, it's set in like a dark gothic school and someone's friends were murdered last time she was there, and then she comes back and she's trying to like unravel what happened, and it's also a little bit sapphic, so it was good. The reveal just wasn't what I kind of anticipated. Again, this would be much higher if I enjoyed the reveal more. It's forgettable. Like every time this book is brought up, I'm like, oh, I read that, yeah. Next is Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana Enriquez. Oh, actually, I don't have it, but this is the other one, Things We Lost in the Fire. It's like a short story collection. I just wanted to show a physical book because it's annoying me. I don't have any of them with me. The same author has like a similar like illustration on the front. This is like a short story collection. Again, interesting. I thought that it was a better short story collection than Cursed Bunny. Again, no, I can't actually remember a lot of the short stories within there, so like can't tell you too much about it. Next we have In the Miso Soup by Ryu Murakami. Ryu Murakami. This is another kind of extreme horror about a man called Frank, who is an American over in Tokyo, I believe. And he gets a tour from someone who lives in Tokyo about like the sex industry in Tokyo, and then it gets all a bit weird. I thought this was a beautifully written story. There was one scene in it that was like, it was like my first bit of extreme horror that I'd ever read, and I was like, oh my god, what is going on right now? If you know the scene, you know. It wasn't as shocking as I think that some other people that I'd seen talking about this book made it out, but maybe that is just because I have like a high tolerance for like horror, because I watch a lot of horror movies, I rate a lot of horror movies, I like disturbing films, I like extreme horror. Tokyo setting is beautiful, it's very visceral, I could definitely like picture myself there, and it was a good story and interesting enough. So One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I know this is everyone's favourite book, everyone loves this book, everyone loves Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is actually the only Taylor Jenkins Reid book I've ever read, ever. This woman, and she was married to this guy called Jesse, and I think it was like a couple of years after they got married, his plane crashes or helicopter crashes and he's presumed dead. So this woman is moving on with her life, she gets into a new relationship, and then it turns out he is alive, and she's like, oh my gosh, this was like however many years ago, I've moved on, I've like put him behind me, I had to, and now he's back, like what do I do? I don't like spoil anything, but like I think she ended up with the wrong person. I know it's an unpopular opinion, but I just liked this character more. Yeah, basically the whole toss-up is like a love triangle, like who will she end up with, who won't she end up with? And again, love triangles aren't my thing, because I'm like, what if they end up with the person I don't want? Which is exactly what happened in this one. This is like the middle zone right now. We have Slav by Aaron Beauregard. This is a book. Yes, it's a book. An extreme horror book, and it's disgusting, it's disturbing, it is gory, it has a lot of major triggers, major triggers. Please read the triggers if you're going to read this book. It is extreme, it's the most extreme book I've ever read and maybe ever will read. It was disgusting and disturbing, but I enjoyed it. I didn't feel like it had any actual plot. It was a lot of like torture. No, kind of like the Saw films, but without the storyline, but worse and more disgusting and messed up. So there you go. Next we have Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This is like a typical romance. Everyone's read it. I thought it was okay. It's about this woman. What's she called? She's called Nora. She's called Nora, I think. And there's this guy called Charlie, and they're in a small town, and they're both like in the book industry. One's a book publisher, one's a romance. It's cute, it's like small town vibes. I remember like nearly tearing up at the end of this book, so you know, I thought it was good, I thought it was okay, but nothing groundbreaking once again. We have Terms and Conditions and The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. These are kind of again grouped together because I think I like them equally. I gave them the same rating. I think I gave them both like 3.5 stars. This is like the 3.5 stars zone, I guess, right now. The first one takes place at like Disneyland, the second one takes place in this like massive gorgeous house. They're all billionaires. It's part of like the Dreamland Billionaires, that's it, the Dreamland Billionaires trilogy, which the next one's coming out soon and I will read it. It was an enjoyable romance. It was like one of the best romances I've read this year, but I thought that like some of the characters were like too mean to the heroines. Like it's very like Grumpy Sunshine, and I thought at some point some of them could be too grumpy. Like I didn't love that. We have Tender is a Flesh by this one is also like an extreme horror. It's basically about a world where there's no more animal meat for people to eat because it's all been like contaminated, so they basically end up making cannibalism legal, but they do this by like genetically engineering humans and kind of farming them like a factory farm. It's like very visceral and gory, but it has like this other little storyline. I won't tell you what happens, but like the end, I didn't find it shocking, but I can see how other people did. I read this in one night as well. Again, just not like my favourite, but definitely a good read to pick up. I thought it was maybe question a lot of things, which is like, I guess, a really good thing for an extreme horror. It's not just the gore, it also like has philosophical elements to it and thought-provoking things, which is always a plus. So Sweet Sorrow by David Nichols. I read this like at the very start of the year, so like I can't 1000% remember everything, but I do remember the ending, and the ending made me cry. I just remember like being like, oh, it's about like a childhood romance while they're all like navigating their teen years and their first like parties and dabbling with drugs, while also being at the Shakespeare like summer camp, which I love. I love like stories that have like theatre included in them because I'm doing a drama degree and I just think it's really cute. But Sweet Sorrow, it's in the title. It's also a little bit sad. So I definitely like recommend this as like a contemporary romance, more heavy on the contemporary. But next we have Neon Gods by Katie Roberts. Oh my gosh, I have this one too. A physical book. Yeah, this is Neon Gods by Katie Roberts. This is a retelling of Persephone and Hades. It's really spicy as well. Like, this is also kind of like a dark romance, but basically Persephone is like lured in to marry Zeus, who has like been rumoured to have killed his previous wives. So she's running and she bumps into the underworld. She ends up in the underworld and she meets Hades, and they kind of make a deal to make sure that she doesn't have to marry Zeus and so he can get back at Zeus. And it is spicy. It is a bit erotic, but it was a good read and I enjoyed it nonetheless. Next we have Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Césaire. This book is basically about a girl who moves from like a city to a small town, and there's like a rivalry between like the parents and the kids that are there, like teenagers that are there. I really enjoyed like the storyline of just her and her friends. Like I always like seeing kind of like people, you know, a couple of years before me and like how they're navigating the world, because I know like at that time it was hard for me to navigate as well, and just seeing interactions between like young people, and I thought this was written really well in that sense. There's a killing spree that starts happening. This is like a slasher, clowns in a cornfield, killing people. Yeah, you have to suspend your disbelief for this one because it is like unrealistic and like it has a lot of political undertones that kind of took away from the story. But like if you just take it as it is, it's like a fun slasher, then you won't have anything taken away from you. Because I had a great time reading this. I'm definitely going to read the second one. So there you go, that's Clown in a Cornfield. Great. Read it during Halloween as well. I think that'll be fun. It's like a very fun slasher, but still gory nonetheless. It's a YA. But we have Tomi by Junji Ito, which is like the thickest book ever. I wish I had it right here just to like show you how thick it is. It's like 800 pages. It's really hard to explain. It's kind of like this femme fatale, beautiful woman who like lures men into their demise basically, but then it's also the men end up like loving her so much that she becomes the victim in some sense, but she's made them that way. And it's very interesting. Like I found it interesting the fact that Tomi is the villain, but the men are driven to like insatiability like by her, and I kind of like found that interesting, whether there's some like undertones of feminism to that. I'm not 100% sure. Enjoyed it, but again, there is some Junji Ito that's a little bit higher on this list. It would have been a little bit better if it was a little bit shorter. I found it a little bit repetitive. It's a collection of short stories again with like an overarching story, and I didn't love every short story within it. But again, clump them all together is the Heartstopper series by Alice Oseman. I love this graphic novel. I think it's so sweet. Not watched the show yet, but I'm very excited to. Representativity, is that a thing? The Representativity, whatever. But this is just a beautiful series. It's so cute. It's just heartwarming and lovely. But the fourth book does deal with some like potentially triggering topics, so make sure you do look into that before you read the fourth one. I thought it handled coming out and self-harm and eating disorders and things like that extremely well, especially for like a young adult audience. I thought it was great. So definitely read these. Again, I just have a few books that I liked a bit more, but I 100% recommend these. Like I gave them like 4.5 stars all each. In 12th place we have Bunny by Mona Awad, and for literally like 80% of this book I thought this was going to be like my favourite book of the year. This is like a dark academia about these like kind of mean girls that call themselves the bunnies. Like basically there's this like outsider in their like English lit class, which again I love because like I'm an English lit student as well, so like I just love reading about it. And they kind of take her in and it kind of turns into this kind of fantasy smut salon. That's all I'm gonna say. I did not enjoy the ending. I thought that 85% of it was a 5-star read, and then the last 15% let it down for me. It went too fantasy. I don't love like theorizing, especially when I can't pinpoint what theory I like. I like to have a pinpointed theory for my conclusion. Anyway, So it's a great like dark academia, kind of Mean Girls. I've said that 100 times. So number 11 is Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. I love Sally Rooney. This book was not as good as Normal People. That's like one of my top 10 books of all time. I love Normal People, but it was great. Sally Rooney just has this amazing way of writing that just makes me want to read everything she puts out. It's about infidelity and romance and navigating your life, I guess. And the character, oh my gosh, what's her name? Could empathise with her and her situation and how her head worked and her thoughts. And I also really liked Bobby. I just loved all the characters in this, and it was just a great contemporary romance, I guess. It was good. To my top 10. So number 10 we have Shiver by Junji Ito. This is a short story collection by Junji Ito, but I loved every single story. I could not, usually in like short story collections I like tick the stories that I like, so if I want to reread I can just go back and like flick to the page. But in this one I was like going through to tick and I was like, I love all of them, like I'm not going to tick this. It has some amazing great stories in there, like definitely some of Junji Ito's best work in my humble opinion. I just thought this was great. Story, they're all disturbing, there's a lot of body horror, it's graphic, it's beautiful. Just kind of like do your research on Junji Ito if you're like thinking of reading anything by him, because I can't explain it too well. It's like people describe it as like the better HP Lovecraft. 9 I have Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter, which, oh my goodness, I remember I read this on audiobook, so I actually that's the only audiobook I've ever read. Like I listened to it and like there's a scene including like, and if you know, you know. There's snuff films involved, it's a thriller, like an extreme thriller I'd say. Loads of twists and turns, very like high action packed. It was great, it was very disturbing, but yeah, very graphic. It has a cult following. I thought it was really good as well. I think that the reason it's not a little bit higher is because I did read it, like I did listen to it on audio instead of physically read it, and I found it made it slower. Like the audiobook was like 17 hours long. I think it's fantastic. At number 8, Uzumaki by Junji Ito. Uzumaki has my heart. It is an amazing book. Like all I can say is like how this man like makes horror out of something as simple as spirals. This whole like thick 500-page book is about the horror of spirals. Like he makes spirals into like body horror, into like just horror. It's like I was scared of spirals after reading this. Like spirals, it's not like clowns or like ghosts, it's spirals. Like I recommend Uzumaki by Junji Ito. I don't know if I'd start with that. I would start with Shiver, I think, just to like get a feel if you enjoy him. Like that's his best short story collection in my opinion. And then if you enjoyed it, then go onto Uzumaki. I still have Gaio to read up there on my bookshelf, which I will be reading soon. 7 we have Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, same guy who wrote Never Let Me Go, which is also like an amazing book. I love it. I might do like like my favorite books of all time video, because I think that would be, I just love talking about like my favorite books. I feel like I'd have to like write notes though. I haven't written any notes before this video. I'm literally just going into it like beep, 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 beep. So Clara and the Sun is basically about this AF, which is like, it stands for like artificial friend, but it's an artificial intelligence that is made to be companions of children when they're younger. And without like getting into too many spoilers, I don't want to spoil anything. Clara goes home with this little girl, and you kind of question like what makes someone human. Like this AF is so lovable and kind and friendly and has thoughts. It was strange to be in the mind of an AI instead of the mind of, you know, someone producing an AI, and it's not everyone's cup of tea, but yeah, I loved it. So at number 6 we have Verity by Colleen Hoover. This is the only Colleen Hoover book I've read, and it's the only Colleen Hoover book I have any urge to read at the minute. It's kind of basic, but like it was just so good. Like it was actually frightening. The twist, I was like I thought the last twist just like got me. I like had no clue what to think. I was like like hyperventilating. I made my mum like read this book straight after me so I could like have her opinion on it as well. Like that's like, if I give it to my mum and I'm like, read this, then you know that I enjoyed that story. And I was just like a thriller about this woman who goes to live in this writer called Verity's house to like finish her last book, because Verity has had an accident and she lives with her husband and kind of starts an affair with Verity's husband while Verity's still ill. And there's just loads of twists and turns, and she finds Verity's autobiography and she's like interested, so she starts reading it, and yeah, It was a great thriller. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Like, I love this book. I think it was so good, and I didn't expect to enjoy Colleen Hoover because like no other of her stories really like made me want to read them. At 5th place, getting into my top 5 books I've read this year. Woo! So far, of course. We have Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I love this book. This book is like, it's enigmatic, it's interesting, it's exciting, it's mythological, it's full of grandeur. I have a back to read. The world that Piranesi thought he knew is becoming strange and dangerous. The beauty of the house is immeasurable, its kindness infinite. And the Daily Mail has written, "This house will haunt my dreams." I feel like the cover actually just does a good job of this book. Like, it's just enigmatic and exciting and mythological, and there's a lot of like statues and like grand palace kind of imagery. Piranesi was just so sweet. I love Piranesi. He was so sweet. I just loved him. Like, I cried at the end of this book. Like, this book for me was like also kind of like a metaphor for trauma, and yeah, I loved it. I mean, I feel like it should actually be a little bit higher, because this was like my favourite book of the year. Why is it number 5? I don't know why I put it there. Love you. Okay, so at number 4 we have Gone to See the Riverman by Christopher Triana. This is another extreme horror. It's about this woman I read this yesterday. Woman who is writing back and forth letters with this man who is in prison, and she becomes kind of like obsessed with him and interested in him, and he asks her to like prove her loyalty to do one final task for him, which is to go and see the Riverman. And she takes her sister along. It's this like quest, and it gets darker and darker, and it turns a little bit like crazy, kind of religious, like just insane. I really enjoyed this book. I thought the ending as well, I was like, oh, what the heck is going on? Yeah, it just blew me away. It was shocking, it was grotesque. Like, they have some, again, trigger warnings, they have some really dark themes in there that like, there was a few things that was like, oh, okay, like this is dark. So imaginative, great. I love this book, that is why it's number 4. Then number 3, another book I read yesterday, is Only Ever Yours by Louise O'Neill. This has been described as like a mix between The Handmaid's Tale and like Mean Girls, which I wouldn't say is exactly true. I'd say it's like pretty similar to The Handmaid's Tale, but I guess with like a more of a like juvenile feel to it. It's about these like women aren't being produced anymore, like they're like genetic, I don't know anything about science, having to like genetically engineer women, and the only like real naturally born people are male. It's very regressive, it's a dystopia. They can either be wives, concubines, or chastities, which means they like never have intercourse, and they just stay and teach other women how to be wives and concubines. And it's about this one girl who is on her way to like the ceremony, like I guess kind of paralleling with The Handmaid's Tale of like the ceremony where they choose whether they want a certain person to be a wife or a concubine. And this was just devastating. Like, this book was absolutely devastating. Like, when I say like I've not cried this hard at a book in a really, really long time. There's a lot of negative reviews on Goodreads and Storygraph. I use Storygraph, by the way, not Goodreads, for my books. It might not be as like realistic as A Handmaid's Tale could be, because there aren't religious undertones. It's kind of like, this is the way the world is and you just have to accept it. But it did feel realistic to me, like, you know, labeling women as like wife material or like concubine, like very hard to get through, like extremely hard to get through. Like, those pages I wanted to skip because I was like, I can't read this, like my heart hurts thinking about this book. But that is why it is at number 3. It was just devastating. Again, just like look at like maybe like triggers. It's very, very misogynistic, but obviously it's like a feminist dystopia. That's my top 2. I couldn't decide. I put them at like what, like the same, like my top 1 book this year. First, I have The Troop by Nick Cutter. That is like my favourite book ever. I just adore this book. This is a book that like got me back into reading. It's about these like Boy Scouts. There's like 5 of them, I think, and they're pretty young, and they go with their scoutmaster to this like island, and then a man turns up on the island and he has an infection, and like they don't know what it is, they don't know what it does, but they have to isolate on this island, and they're like, oh my gosh, what do we do? and it's these young boys just like fighting for their survival. It's extreme, it's grotesque, it's exciting. I love the characters. It was fast. A lot of animal cruelty, well, bits of animal cruelty, so again, triggers for that, triggers for like children being injured and killed. It was like my favourite book. Like, I love it. It's got like the most special place in my heart ever because it like introduced me back into reading, and it's like a horror, and I love horror. So that's The Troop by Nick Cutter. I thought it was amazing. A lot of like body horror. It's very like visceral, like worms. Without giving too much away, just like worms. There you go. That's your answer for that one. Like equal. I also have this one with me because I brought it to uni. Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. I love this book. This book is basically like, it's hard to explain. I remember when I wanted to read this, like I read this because of like booktube reviews, but I was like, what is this about? Like, I don't understand. It's basically about like children who come back from adventures. Like think like the kids of Narnia, like going to like a school where they help them like come to terms with what's happened. It's like magical children who have been to worlds that aren't their own and their parents don't understand, and they go to this school, and they either, there's like two schools, one of them's like trying to get back to their world, and one of them's like accepting it and getting over it and pushing it behind, because like some of these worlds are like dangerous and scary, and it's just these children who have like been through such terrible things. It's only short, it's like, it's not a novella, is it? I don't know, but I just, yeah, this book can do no wrong in my eyes. I love it, and I really want to read the rest of them, but like they're quite expensive. And there's like 10 books in the series, so yeah. So The Troop and Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire are my favourite books of the year. Again, I love this book too. I love holding it. It's one of my favourite books. 44 books. I know it's been quite a long video. These aren't all the books I've ever read. This is just this year from January until now. And yeah, I am really sorry again about the light flickering. And I didn't write any notes. Like, I should probably have written notes. I just wrote like the order of the books. But yeah, thanks so much for watching, and I might be making like a favourites video soon or something. If anyone has anything they want to see, let me know. Yeah, I'll see you over on my Bookstagram, and that's it from me. Bye!